So we finally have a speaker, as we all teased. It happening. It only took, 19 days where the United States didn't have a speaker. In my opinion, it didn't really change all that much, but it is what it is. Here is the moment that the vote happened and that Mike Johnson, representative from Louisiana, became the next Speaker of the House. Let's take a listen.
Well, Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 220 votes.
There it is. He got 220 votes. All the Republicans actually united behind him. Honestly, impressive feat after the multiple defeats and all those things that happened. But it bears the question, who is Mike Johnson? We're not the only ones asking. Half the people in Washington are like, who the hell is this guy? He's barely been in Congress that long. What's his track record? Johnson, based upon my research, is probably the most conservative speaker aligned with the base since Newt Gingrich. I don't think there's another way to describe it. But Hastert, Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, and we're missing Boehner. These are all multi-year creatures of the establishment, people who had ties to the party. Sure, they were swung, by the base. But this person is someone I would really describe as a winger. Not only just in terms of MAGA sympathies, but deeply embedded in the capital C conservative movement for a long time, going all the way back to some of the gay marriage fights, which we will get into. And just to give you an idea here, he's asked about his vote not to certify the 2020 election. Here's how he and his colleagues handled that question a couple of days ago. Let's take a listen.
Mr. Johnson, you helped lead the efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Will you
Next question.
That was Virginia Fox, the congresswoman there at the top saying, shut up. But it doesn't erase, it was a significant problem for Republicans in the 2022 midterms. Johnson, quote, recruited 125 Republicans to join him in signing the U.S. Supreme Court brief saying saying as much, and on January 6, 2021, that voted against certifying the elections. That brief was the one filed by the state of Texas. So he not only was a person who voted against certifying the results of the 2020 election, he actually took a pretty active role in getting some of his co-workers to sign on to that. Do you want to comment on that before we move to entitlements and other things?
Yeah. I was thinking about this. You used to talk about Josh Hawley and highbrow stop the steal.
Yes, this is very much.
He's kind of like that, and it sort of seems to typify his whole approach to politics. Mm-hmm. People talk about the banality of evil. This is like the banality of extremism. He has this, and I think this is why he's able to win the quote-unquote moderates. And he won unanimously, okay? Every single, even the most embattled Biden district Republicans voted for this man who holds incredibly extreme positions, as we're about to get into. But moderates tend to not really focus that much on actual policy. And for them, it's all about just the decorum and the vibes and the cordiality, et cetera. So it's no surprise to me that in the end, they were cowed by this message of just this is embarrassing and it's messy. So we have to unite behind someone, and it doesn't really matter who that someone ultimately is. So yeah, I think the fact that he holds so many and is a true believer, hard right, real right-wing positions in the party as you move into an election season where Republicans paid dearly in the last midterms because of their extremism on Stop the Steal and abortion in particular. Yeah, I think this could be a real political problem for them.
The question is just how much Johnson is a real major political figure. Now, obviously, somebody like Nancy Pelosi.
Or how long he even lasts.
How long he lasts. Whether, honestly, anyone cares. It used to be Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, John Boehner. They were titans not because of the control necessarily of the House. They raised a ton of money. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Same with Nancy Pelosi. They did not live in Washington or even their district. These were warriors who were always on the plane. This fundraiser, that fundraiser. Tuesday morning, I'm here in this city. Tuesday night, I'm in this city. Wednesday morning, I'm in another city, and I have a reception at every single one. Every hour of their time is scheduled. It's around fundraising. Fundraising is the nexus of power because that's why people listen to them in the first place. Is he going to do that? Honestly, his fundraising track record is like $1 million. He's got a 300x his return. Do the big donors in New York and in California important. Like, do they even know who this guy is? Probably not. He's never been to any of those meetings. That is a titanic, like, personal life burden that he's now got to bear. On top of running the House, on top of, is this the real setter of policy? Ryan was a setter of policy. There's no question about it. He was a policy guy. Kevin, he never cared about policy. He just decided to go with whatever. Gingrich, though, was a real policy person. And Boehner kind of was also in his own way. Who knows? This is the big question of, like, is he going to get dragged because he just doesn't want, like, dragged to wherever the center of the party is and allow other people to negotiate?
Probably.
Or likely, I think. But on his own positions, and this is where the big question is will he become a national figure, somebody the Democrats can run against? He certainly embodies, much of the most unpopular parts of the Republican Party from the 2020 election, but also on entitlement programs. As I said, this is a very traditional conservative Republican. Here's what he had to say in the past.
The safety net programs, but the reality is they're headed towards bankruptcy. In just a few number of years, Social Security goes belly up. So does Medicare, Medicaid, all of these big spending programs, because we're drowning in debt. And so we've got to think about long-term reforms to those programs.
Long-term reforms, all of that, I can guarantee you're going to see that in an ad somewhere. May not work, obviously, against him in Louisiana, but it might work in, I don't know, Michigan, someplace like that. On top of that, though, and this really, to me, is the death knell, probably his single most unpopular position. Let's put this up there on the screen. In the past, he has put out, this is a tweet, for example, where he says, breaking, late yesterday, the Louisiana Department of Health informed abortion facilities in our state the right to life has now been restored. If you perform an abortion and get imprisoned at hard labor for 1 to 10 years and you are fined $10K to $100K. On top of that, signing on and directly endorsing a national abortion ban. So that is probably the most salient one and probably the single most unpopular position that the man holds. I'm talking nationally, not necessarily in his district. Obviously, he got elected, has been reelected multiple times since 2017. But Johnson has been a conservative winger on cultural issues now for, honestly, decades. Based upon my research, as I said, he very much comes from the traditional, like, Bush wing of the party in terms of his heavy activism on evangelical issues from the beginning, and then since being elevated to Congress in 2017 has also adopted kind of a MAGA flair to him. So to be honest, I actually think he's a good choice to represent the Republican Party, because I think, to be like, really, he has his finger on the pulse of a lot of MAGA stuff from the 2020 election, on Ukraine as well. We can put this up there. For example, he has voted against every single Ukraine aid package since May of 2022.
Is it just me or that picture looks like a totally different dude?
That is an awful picture of him. I think he learned how to do his hair in the interim. But Mike Johnson has voted against Ukraine aid, for debt reasons, and says we need to care about our border. He didn't vote to certify the election, comes from the evangelical base of the party. He's, like, as you said, he's somebody who holds, like, pretty traditional Republican positions, but also is, like, traditional but unpopular for the general electorate. And also has, like, a nice affect to him. He's got, like, multiple kids. He seems like a nice guy. The only thing going against him is he's 5'8", which, I got some questions about it. No offense to the short guys.
As a 5'8" woman, I'm supportive of his height. But okay, let me give you a little bit more about this guy just so you get a full sense. He is some may say true believer, others might say religious fanatic in terms of his social conservative views. Longtime veteran of the, LGBTQ war on opposing any sort of rights for gay people, even going so far as when he was an attorney and spokesman for this religious right group called the Alliance Defense Fund, which apparently is known today as the Alliance Defending
ADF,
Freedom.
yeah.
He authored an amicus brief opposing Supreme Court ruling in Lawrence versus Texas, which overturned state laws that criminalized gay sex between consenting adults, okay? So if you ask the American public, overwhelmingly, they do not think that what you do in the bedroom should be the subject of state law. He was on the other side of that, writing in part States have many legitimate grounds to proscribe same-sex deviant sexual intercourse. He goes on to say, by closing these bedroom doors, they have opened a Pandora's box. Okay, so those are some of the things that he was arguing, albeit in the early 2000s. He's still not just all in on like the anti-trans stuff that's very popular in Republican circles these days, but he's also opposed to gay marriage. Like I said, he is a true believer on that, on abortion, etc. And so, you know, do I think that Trump is going to be the center of attention for the general election? There's no doubt about it. But part of why Democrats had more success than they expected in the midterms is because they were successfully able to paint like, hey, it's not just Trump. All of these people are wacko. All of these people are way out there with incredibly unpopular positions that are unpalatable to the overwhelming majority of Americans. Mike Johnson very much helps Democrats to be able to make that case. And, you know, Democrats are kind of bad at grabbing narratives and bad at, like, you know, pushing their messaging, et cetera. But I would not doubt that they try to use him to try to paint this broader picture, especially because, again, every single Republican voted for him. So even a guy like Mike Lawler, who's in this, you know, swing Biden district, whatever, like he is now tarred with this guy and all of his extreme positions. So as much as he may try to separate himself, I'm different than the Republicans, et cetera, you voted for this guy who wanted to criminalize gay sex and is against gay marriage and wants a national abortion ban from the moment of conception, and was all in on Stop This Deal, et cetera, et cetera. So good luck, guys.
I think that, well, the question, as I said, it remains, is like, will Johnson become a Nancy Pelosi type figure? The reason that Pelosi, even when Obama was president, was like the bug, you know, it's like everyone was like, oh my goodness, Pelosi, she's like a demon. And she was like
in every ad, every Republican ad. 2010.
Yeah, actually, I'm sure you know.
I know very well.
Against you. Yeah, it was like it's like she was the president. Is he gonna become that? I don't think so. Democrats in particular, and even moderates, like they hate Trump a lot more. The question is like, what about in an after Trump world if that happens? Let's say Trump loses and this guy is still the speaker. Now what? Or what if he's still the Republican leader? And then what tactics and all of that is he gonna use? Now,
well, and what does it do for their ability to hold on to the House, which they have a very narrow margin in?
That's another great question. Is he gonna raise money for people who are pro-gay marriage? Or Nancy, so I forget what Nancy Mace actually believes on abortion. I honestly don't remember. But it's like, is she going to raise money for her to be run? I think she's pro-choice or like pro-choice-ish or something. Not in the mainstream of the Republican Party. Let's at least say that. Well, is he going to raise money based upon his beliefs or like his standard? Like what litmus test is he going to impose? This is why, you know, being ideologically flexible is actually a benefit whenever you're the leader. If you think about people like McConnell. McConnell does not care about basically anything except power and also funding foreign wars in Ukraine and in Israel now. So he flexes his muscle very, very rarely whenever he actually wants something. That's it. I mean, he's conservative, quote unquote, on economic issues for big business and all of that. But he does that so that he can raise money so that he can elect more Republicans. Chuck Schumer. Schumer does not believe anything. This is a guy who at one point wrote a book about why we need a border wall and is now like the biggest illegal immigrant lobbyist in Washington. So it's like, you know why? Because he wants to get elected. In terms of Kirsten Sinema and then, I don't know, Bernie Sanders, he looks at them as one and the same. He like just wants his caucus to run. Yeah, and actually, like as I said, there's a lot of good reasons for that whenever you're in leadership, because when you have a real agenda, it will obviously alienate other members in your party. How will Mike Johnson govern? We have no idea. On Israel, though, we do know this. This is probably one of the most pro-Israel legislators speakers probably to ever occupy the chair. Here's what he had to say immediately upon taking the gavel. Let's take a listen.
Extraordinary crisis right now. And the world needs us to be strong. They need us to remember our creed and our admonition. Turmoil and violence have rocked the Middle East and Eastern Europe. We all know it. And tensions continue to build in the Indo-Pacific. The country demands strong leadership of this body, and we must not waver. Our nation's greatest ally in the Middle East is under attack. The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done.
Also, courtesy of Krystal, you actually found this one. This is from Haaretz, Israeli newspaper. Let's put this up there on the screen. The new House Speaker Mike Johnson, an evangelical Christian, holds ties to Israel's far right. He described his 2020 visit to the Jerusalem temple, quote, as the fulfillment of a biblical prophecy, and his election is one of the most significant victories to date for evangelicals in D.C. I genuinely do think that is true. Also, as I said, and we've tried to explain here in the past, evangelical Christians are more pro-Israel in many cases than some people who are American Jews. And it's because it all ties to what we began our show with, this whole like prophecy of Isaiah and end times. For those who are Christians, I'm sorry, I didn't grow up Christian. I don't know anything about the Bible or the prophecy of Isaiah or whatever. This is only based upon my understanding of like a biblical battle for the end times. It is why evangelical Christian groups often make pilgrimages to Israel, because it's described as like the final battleground. Actually, when I was in Israel, I encountered a lot of these people in Jerusalem, like from the Church of Memphis, Tennessee or whatever, and they're like, here's where it's all gonna happen. It's, the soldiers of the East or whatever will come from there. I remember being like alongside and just being like, oh, wow, this is kind of crazy. Anyway, this is one of those people who is very much subscribes to those beliefs, and so their fervor for Israel is on another level in some cases than even people like Joe Lieberman or other American Jews who serve. We've been joking about this privately. To date, the only American congressman who has worn an IDF uniform to the U.S. Congress,
which is crazy,
Brian Mast, is an evangelical Christian. He is not even a Jew. But that is yeah. I mean, look, if you ask me, wearing the uniform of any foreign military probably should be illegal for a congressman, but that's a whole other conversation.
I mean, yeah. The thing about basing your support for Israel on your religion is that's not negotiable.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
You can't debate with this person. You can't argue with them. You can't show them what's happening in Gaza. You can't persuade them with facts.
Yeah, they don't care, right?
Because this is foundational to their belief system. So yeah, they don't care. I mean, the stuff Netanyahu was saying that we played of like, the people of light versus the people of darkness, and, framing it as a holy war, and we have to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah, and we will fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah, and the axis of, like, he would be nodding along, absolutely. And, he already made good on his promise that his first act as speaker was to push through this resolution unconditionally affirming support for Israel. And also, by the way, and Michael Tracy was tweeting out some of these specific provisions with some very bellicose language towards Iran, which I want to say was almost unanimously supported 412-10. There were 9 Democrats who voted no: Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Andre Carson, Green of Texas, AOC, Summer Lee of Pennsylvania, Ramirez, Ilhan Omar. There was one Republican who voted no, Thomas Massey.
Yes.
Like a libertarian.
He is libertarian. He votes no on like everything, so it's not necessarily a reflection of his views.
But I want to say, like, I would have actually felt differently about this resolution that's just like affirming support for Israel, and Israel has a right to defend herself, et cetera, if it had come right at the time when they had just suffered these attacks. But now that we're into, the siege of Gaza and the indiscriminate bomb, more than 7,000 targets, 42% of Gaza destroyed, the overwhelming toll on civilians, the thousands of children dead, the hospitals that are no longer functioning, all of these things. When you support a resolution such as this with no language about any of that, you are giving total green light and carte blanche to what the Israeli government is doing. So coming in this context at this moment, I mean, I think it's disgraceful. And I want to applaud in particular, and we're about to talk about Jamal Bowman and the fire alarm stuff, but I want to applaud him in particular, because for a lot of the Democrats who voted no on this resolution, their districts are such where they're unlikely to pay a political price. It's relatively safe, not that it's ever totally safe, because you know that these Democratic PACs that are extraordinarily pro-Israel, that are there to enforce unanimous backing of Israel no matter what, they're still going to come in after them, but they're a little bit safer. But Jamal Bowman is in a district where, this could be a real issue for him, and he voted no. And I just want to say, I think that took a lot of courage in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think politically, I don't think there's any real price to be paid for just like being generically pro-Israel. They're not looking at it in the same way. They're like, yeah, we were supposed to pass it on day one, but we couldn't because nothing happened. So yeah, we're just going to pass it now. I mean,
well, it's also like, again, all the problems that we have, like all of the issues that we have here and inflation and the struggles and et cetera. And our priority is to once again, for the 1 millionth time, reaffirm that Israel can do whatever they want, whenever they want. Seems like a very skewed priority system to me as well. And in terms of the political piece, it was interesting hearing Ryan talking to Emily yesterday about John Fetterman, who has become this like extreme Israel hawk in all of this. And his analysis was basically like, Fetterman decided in his Senate primary that he would just do whatever the pro-Israel Democrats, the Democratic Majority for Israel people, which is this big PAC that, like I said, tries to enforce like unanimity of opinion on being pro-Israel no matter what, that he would just basically be like, whatever you all want me to say, I'll say. And so he's just like sticking to that. But there's lots of political incentive to to vote for this resolution, to say the right things, to, as the ADL dude said, get the story right on Israel. And it's very difficult to talk about this without playing into anti-Semitic tropes, but it's true. There's way more money in organization between being on that side of the issue. There are basically $0 to be gotten in terms of campaign contributions of speaking out for Palestinians or being, on the side of Palestinian civilian life. There is no political benefit to be gained whatsoever. And so, yeah, that's why you get an incredibly lopsided result like this, because all of these people can see where the political power lies and where their personal political benefit is as well. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.